Good afternoon. I'm Lori Matson, President and CEO of the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us for the Hanford Update Virtual Luncheon featuring Hanford Site Manager Brian Vance. As we all know, the Hanford site is a major economic driver for the Tri-Cities. Today, Brian will speak to the history and the progress being made at the site, COVID-19 response and timeline, and the economic impact the site has on our community. Before we get to Brian's presentation, I'd like to update you on what the Chamber's been doing for our members during the pandemic. One of the most impactful initiatives we've been engaged with is the Tri-Cities Open and Safe Coalition, where we're partnering with TriDec, Visit Tri-Cities, and the Benton Franklin Health District. I hope you'll visit tcopenandsafe.com to find up-to-date resources and guidelines for reopening your business and staying safe. We've recently partnered with the Minority Business Development Agency to distribute 100 PPE kits to local minority-owned, women-owned, and other small businesses. In late August, the Chamber formed the Tri-Cities Fitness Coalition with over 20 business owners in the gym and fitness industries. The Fitness Coalition sent a letter to Governor Jay Inslee urging him to allow the reopening of fitness centers, a request he recently approved. That was a huge win for the business owners in the coalition, as well as Tri-Citians who rely on indoor fitness. Additionally, the Chamber continues to maintain a COVID-19 resource guide and offer a rapid response phone line, a free resource to business owners to obtain one-on-one help. Please visit tricityregionalchamber.com for this information and much more. Though the local business community has been hit hard by the health crisis, we're thrilled that businesses are still joining and engaging with our organization for the first time. I have the pleasure of welcoming the Chamber's newest members. People for People, PG Long Flooring, Salus Law PLLC, and Keller Williams Tri-Cities. Thank you for joining the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce. Our final piece of Chamber business is to announce our September Member of the Month. Since May, the Chamber's Awards and Recognition Committee has chosen to recognize businesses that have positively impacted our community during this trying time. I'm pleased to announce that the committee has chosen Tumbleweeds Mexican Flair as the September Member of the Month. Tumbleweeds has been a member of the Regional Chamber for nearly 10 years. They are dedicated to giving back to the community. Recently, owner Keith Moon partnered with another local business to raise thousands of dollars to purchase headphones for local students. The fundraiser was so successful, they went on to purchase school supplies and distribute to students before school began. Congratulations to Keith and the team at Tumbleweeds, September Member of the Month. Today's luncheon is sponsored by Zippy Fiber. Here to speak on behalf of Zippy is Enterprise Account Executive Anastasio Vasquez.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the Chamber for facilitating this luncheon today. My name is Anastasio Vasquez. I'm the Enterprise Account Executive covering the Tri-Cities and all of Eastern Washington for Zippy Fiber. Joining me today is my colleague, Esteban Rivera. He's a mid-market executive covering the Tri-Cities. First off, I want to thank you for having us and allowing us some time to give you a little bit about who we are and what our mission is. Next slide, please. I want to start by going over a few details regarding how we came to be. As most already know, Zippy purchased the frontier assets in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. We are using these assets in conjunction with a $500 million investment to create the best internet experience for our current and future commercial, residential, and wholesale customers. And we do this while being locally operated, which gives us a unique understanding of the Pacific Northwest geography and challenges. I want to take a second to be clear that we are Zippy Fiber and not Frontier rebranded. There are no remnants of Frontier leadership in our company. Go ahead and next slide, please. Our initial investment in the Tri-Cities is $60 million. Construction on new fiber lines have already begun, and we're lighting up new areas of fiber as early as November. In addition, we're adding 40 times more capacity. This is going to allow us to provide your businesses with anywhere between 10 megs and 10 gigs of dedicated fiber speeds. Next slide, please. At Ziply, we operate off three core principles. First is choice and control. Simply, that's what you want, where you want it, and how you want it. Our second is best, fastest network. Once complete, we will have the most advanced fiber network, period. And lastly, but not least, is simple and easy. Our offers are transparent, our service is responsive, your network experience is our single focus. Additionally, we are presenting the most disruptive market rates out there. Next slide, please. We manage our network at 40% of its capacities during peak hours, while most companies operate at 80%. This means that at any given moment, even in our busiest times, Zipply Fiber's network is working on is never working more than 40% of what it can handle. In fact, when something hits 30% utilization, our company usually starts expanding its capabilities in that area. Because of our dual network infrastructure, low capacity limits, and ability to reroute traffic, unlike other companies, our customers won't even notice an outage if there was one. I want to thank you again for the time. Thank you to the Chamber for putting against this luncheon together for us. On the next slide I have here, go ahead, is just some contact information. There's my email and my number. Please take a second to jot that down. And on the next slide, we also have Esteban's contact information. Please take a second to contact down. Next slide, please. Thank you again. And like I said, reach out to us if there's anything we can do.
Thank you, Anastasio, and thank you, Zipply Fiber, for sponsoring our luncheon today. And welcome to the Tri-Cities. We look forward to working with you again in the future. Now I'd like to introduce the chair of the Regional Chamber's Board of Directors, Chris Rivard, to lead us through the rest of today's program. Chris, take it over.
Thank you, Lori, and welcome to everybody. It's great to have everyone with us today, even though we're still in a virtual environment. Special thank you to, or special welcome to our newest members joining the Chamber. And just a plug, I'm really excited about the fact that we are opening up the fitness centers locally. That's such a plus for those that want to get back to their workout schedules as if it was pre-COVID. Let's get to today's featured presentation. Brian Bance is the manager of the Office of River Protection and the Richland Operations Office. In this capacity, Brian is responsible for an overall budget of nearly $2.5 billion with a B dollars and oversight of the contractors and more than 9,000 employees involved in cleanup of the Hanford site. In his role as manager, Brian is responsible for the safe and environmentally acceptable cleanup of the site, including groundwater remediation, hazardous waste and facilities decontamination and disposal operations, treatment and disposal of radioactive chemical liquid waste, and the design, construction, and commissioning of the world's largest complex of nuclear vitrification facilities, the waste treatment and immobilization plant. Brian has more than 30 years of experience in the nuclear industry. Prior to joining DOE, he was a project director at CH2M Hilt Plateau Remediation Company. Please help me welcome Brian Bance.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's always great to provide updates, and really important to provide updates to members of the Tri-City on the work we're doing here. So I do appreciate the opportunity, and I'm hopeful that this will be instructive and a good session for everyone today. If you go to the next slide, please. I'll just give you an overview of the Hanford site at the kind of the macro level as we get started. The site began with the beginning at the Manhattan Project in the 1940s in conjunction with World War II, and ultimately led to the end of the war. The national security mission at the site lasted for about 45 years until about 1989, when the site transitioned from national security to environmental cleanup. And if just at the higher level, 580 square miles, it's about 40 miles of the Columbia River that runs through the site. 2 DOE offices, Office of River Protection and Richland Operations, of which I manage both now as a single manager, 4 prime contractors, and our numbers are a little bit higher than my bio, given maybe it's a little bit dated, but we're about 11,000 employees across the site. The key aspect of our work that we recognize is the importance of our effort relative to the economic center of the state and the Pacific Northwest, given that the site envelopes 40 to 50 miles of the Columbia River, and we're really at the center of the agricultural center of the state, and certainly with the Tri-Cities as well. It is vitally important for us to perform our mission well, continue to safely, efficiently, effectively conduct the cleanup, reduce risk, and allow this region to continue to thrive. My leadership, the DOE team here, is about 350 federal employees. We've got about 200 support contractors that just support my headquarters staff here. And again, 11,000 badged employees across the site. And though PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Lab, is affiliated, is within the same DOE footprint, we're not really affiliated with PNNL directly, though we ultimately work for the same boss at the undersecretary level with Undersecretary DeBar. Next slide. The history of the site, again, is from a national security perspective. I don't know that people really understand at the heyday or at the peak of operations here, we had 9 operating reactors, not the type of reactors that Energy Northwest operates, but reactors simply in place to develop, take uranium, metal, fuel, irradiate it, and create plutonium, which would then go through 5 different processes for basically dissolution of the metal rods and separation of the plutonium. So 20 million fuel rods produced at the Hanford site, 110 tons of irradiated fuel processed through 5 different processes, 74 tons of plutonium produced, which was 2/3 of the nation's plutonium. And with that, really 177 underground tanks with roughly today about 56 million gallons of mixed radiological and chemical waste, and all the infrastructure that allowed all those facilities to operate over more than 4 decades. So a history of national defense, I think, really that really changed the world, but also created our work today with the environmental cleanup. Next slide. In 1989, there was an agreement between the Department of Energy, the state of Washington, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which really created the TriParty Agreement and the basis under which we execute the cleanup today at the Hanford site. We, the DOE, have a regulatory role that's assigned by the Atomic Energy Act associated with radiological materials and contaminants. The EPA is the principal regulator under the CERCLA, and you can read there, what the acronym stands for. And then the Washington Department of Ecology, delegated by the EPA, is the lead authority for RCRA, which is the other regulatory authority that we operate under. So the newer facilities generally under RCRA, and the older cleanup process really governed by the CERCLA process. But I only highlight this to say it's, Hanford is a complicated cleanup, and this is one element of the complication. It's the lines and demarcations between the regulatory agencies as you work together to clean up the site. Next slide, and I'll show a couple of sides of what cleanup looks like, because I don't know that people always can really understand that. This is the H reactor area, one of the reactors along the river. The left-hand side is the during operations, and I'll just ask you to look at all the infrastructure, the pools, the facilities around that operating reactor, and the picture on the right is the all that's left, and it's a reactor facility in interim safe storage, and will remain in this condition, monitored, of course, for 75 years, till such time in the future when the department can make a decision on what next steps relative to remediation we would want to make with that remaining facility. But all the rest of the infrastructure above and under and below ground has been remediated, and we're really in a monitoring phase with that plant. The next slide represents the K Basin. These are the last two reactors along the river that are not placed into interim safe storage. And you can see the picture in 2010, well after operations completed. But again, look at all the infrastructure there. And then the picture as of 2019. And really, there's a little bit of infrastructure left around the last two reactors. And last fall, we were able to remove 35 cubic yards of contaminated sludge, metal filings and things, and corrosion products from fuel. Move those into stainless steel containers, move them away from the river up the T plant, and that put in motion, or has put in motion, the rest of the program that will put those two reactors and all the facilities around them into the similar configurations you saw on the previous slide, interim safe storage, in just the next few years. And so we're really almost complete with the majority of the river corridor effort. And the strategy in the cleanup overall has been clean up along the river, reduce the rest of the Columbia River, move towards the Central Plateau, and then build the infrastructure on the Central Plateau for the tank waste mission. And so I'll be able to talk about that in a few minutes as well. Next slide is really kind of an overview. We had our 30th anniversary of the environmental cleanup of the Hanford site in 2019. And I don't think often we talk about the impressive amount of work that's really been accomplished here and the amount of risk reduction, but just a couple of elements of that. As I mentioned, 9 reactors along the river, 6 are cocooned. 1, the B reactor, is a national park. The other 2 are now on the path to interim safe storage. 22 billion, with a B, gallons of groundwater treated. We treat about 2 billion gallons of groundwater every year to remove the contaminants and really reduce the risk to the Columbia River from the contamination that was placed in the soils over the national security mission. All the spent fuel has been removed from our site into dry storage. Almost 900 facilities demolished, and over 1,300 waste sites remediated. And though we still have work to do, those numbers are impressive. Again, just thinking about the size of the site, the infrastructure required to operate all the facilities on the site, which produced the fuel, irradiated the fuel, processed the fuel, and then maintained all of the power, water, sewer, all the other the infrastructure for really an operating city. And in parallel with all these activities over the last 2 decades, we continued the progress on the waste treatment plant, and we're really closing in on the delivery of that plant to start tank waste treatment in just a few years. The next slide is really an economics picture. A lot of these elements I've talked about before. I think we're particularly proud of the fiscal year 2020 budget. Between Richland and the Office of Protection, the $2.6 billion budget was the largest budget in the cleanup era at the Hanford site. And so obviously, we bring a lot of dollars to the site, dollars to the effort, but we also subcontract a significant amount of work out to the subcontractors around the region. And you can see to the right some different variations of where the funds go, but $604 million subcontracted in 2019. So the economic impact that we provide to the community is significant. And again, with the 11,000 workers, the Department of Energy, just the Hanford site, we're the largest employer in the Tri-Cities area, and we take that role very seriously and understand the commitment that we have, not only to the site and the taxpayers, but also to our community. On the contract transition front, you've probably seen some things in the news. We started the first transition of our mission support contractor, one of the big 4, in August, and that's a 120-day process that should complete right before the Christmas holidays. We will begin the second contractor transition, Central Plateau contractor, on the 5th of October. And so we'll have 2 multi-year, multi-billion-dollar contract transitions running in parallel on the site. And we'll likely announce the 4th contract award for 222S within the next couple of weeks. And so we'll have announced 4 major contract awards this fiscal year for the transition of the site contractors. And it's just part of the natural government contracting process. The only contractor that's staying in the process is the Bechtel contract for the waste treatment plant. That's a construction contract, and it's got some different terms. But otherwise, the rest of the site is changing from a contract perspective. Next slide. I'll talk a little bit about COVID because it's really been, and I think I can speak for everyone. It's really been a leadership challenge across the nation, the globe, and certainly here for us in the Tri-Cities. Our timeline started on the 22nd of March. It was a Sunday, I remember, because I was literally on the phone all day with the headquarters and working through our contractors and the DOE team. That's the point where we actually reduced operations. Up to that point, actually, if you looked at the COVID risk in the Tri-Cities, it was largely isolated to the retirement homes and the meatpacking plant in Walla Walla, and at the community at large, it really wasn't a significant risk yet, though we all saw it on the horizon. Leading up to the 22nd of March, we recognized that we would likely be placed into a max telework situation. So we were issuing, basically having telework fairs to get people to pick up materials, equipment, things like that. And then we were monitoring probably all the same things everyone was. The media coverage, and as everyone here recognizes, the media is really driven by the western part of the state, where the risk at that time was a little bit higher. We focus very heavily on our health and safety culture because that's an important part of doing the work at the Hanford site. So that was certainly a factor. The mindset of the workforce, the mindset of our contractors, our DOE workforce. We were watching the community factors, COVID numbers, but also the healthcare system capacity and capability. We were looking at the personal protective equipment supply chain, because out here, as you recognize, a lot of our work requires personal protective equipment to ensure that we keep the workforce safe. We're also looking at the financial situation that we could be putting a large number of our workers into, because at the point when we made the decision to slow the site operations down, COVID cares had not yet been approved. And so the department identified a means through what we called partial stop work orders, that we could actually stop the work on the site while we continued to pay for those people who typically do not get paid during like a weather day, a snow day out here. We don't pay the building trades, we don't pay subcontractors. And so there's a range of several thousand people who, if we shut the site down and didn't have a means of continuing to provide support, they would go home without a paycheck and then ultimately go on to unemployment and provide, basically a drain on the state, which we also recognized would be difficult for the state to manage as well. So the department, was working very hard throughout early March and really starting in February to define a way that we could, recognizing that Congress was moving forward, but with no time set for when Congress would act, to find a way to, if we had to keep workers home so they could continue to be paid and continue to take care of their families. So we made that decision on the 22nd of March to reduce operations. We implemented what we called essential mission critical operations on the 24th of March. We can't shut down the site in the same way that other businesses and other enterprises can shut down because of the unique hazards we manage here. We have nuclear safety standards we have to maintain. And so during the period from about 24th of March until we were able to actually start the phase 1 transition, we kept about between 1,000 and 1,400 people coming to work every day. Safety and security, as I said, stewardship of the site, and really ensuring that we could continue to manage the unique hazards of the site here safely, protect the community, protect the environment, and really maintain the workforce safety. During that entire time, we had 6 positive COVID cases, and all of those, I think, maybe with the exception of one, were people that had been teleworking, had been off the site for multiple weeks, and none of the people on the site did we have any positive cases or any cases where there could have been transmission from worker to worker on the site. During that time, we were obviously implementing all the COVID controls. We were going through all the work that we typically do under a job hazard analysis process that we use, adding COVID as another hazard that we had to factor into how we did business. And then we were remobilization planning, I would say, as soon as, I can't say the 25th of March, but it wasn't very long after we shut down or reduced operations to essential mission critical. We were focused on remobilization to get back to work. Again, focused on ensuring the health and safety of the workforce. Between really the 22nd of March and that first week, we transitioned more than 6,000 people to telework. And the robustness of the information technology systems, both for the site proper, and I think we were supported by the community as well, was really very robust. That was effectively an uneventful transition beyond some of the emotion, but from a physical transition perspective, went very well. And we will continue to keep people moving forward and forwarding our mission via telework in a lot of areas: permitting, engineering, design, a lot of aspects of the progress that we continue to make out here through people that typically work in offices. They can continue to work from their homes and do it very effectively. The leadership transition that we had to make was fairly significant, though, and I think you've probably all gone through that, because we really had to find new ways to communicate to our workforce. We had to find new ways as the owner and the customer, for our contractors to communicate with our contractors in a very dynamic situation. And we instituted daily calls at my level with the contractor leaders and with my leadership team. I implemented a daily call with my headquarters staff. I started calling it a fireside chat, but every day at noon, I would get on the phone and talk to them about the work we were doing across the site, the current situation in the communities, just to make sure that they understood the state of play, what we were doing as a leadership team for the site, where the site was progressing, where it was not, just to keep everyone connected to the mission. And also making sure we were reinforcing the fact that we recognize people were under stresses that they typically would not be under, and really for longer periods of time. And so making sure we stayed connected and provided those avenues for people to seek help, vent, really stay connected to people. And what we really wanted to do is provide a bridge beyond COVID. Because if you listen to the news during a period of crisis like this, if all you did was listen to the news and that's the only focus you had, people get into a mode of operation that's very negative and really kind of destructive. And so we focused on what we were doing to move through the period of challenge and try to paint a picture of the future that we could provide a bridge to our workforce, not only the 350 feds and our support contractors in the headquarters staff, my headquarters staff, but also with the contractors and their staffs as well. And I think we did that pretty well. There's always things to learn. We actually sent out micro surveys of 3 or 4 questions just to keep a continuous pulse on the team. And I think that was very helpful. And we got some really insightful inputs from our team that we were able to leverage back into the way we were communicating and the way we were managing the challenges. From the 26th of May until the 31st of August, we were in our first phase of remobilization. And as of the end of this coming week, we will have remobilized the workforce to about 6,000, over 6,000 at that point. All of the workers that couldn't telework, we were able to get back to work and have been able to get back to work. And so not knowing what COVID cares was going to happen, and even though I recognize it's in the CR, but the CR is not passed yet, we wanted to make sure that we had all the non-portable workers back to work during the time frame, so we could mitigate some of that risk of financial impact to families and things. And we've actually progressed a lot of work. We were able to, the tank side cesium removal system is a system that will actually deliver waste, process waste, to be prepared to deliver to the waste treatment plant during the pandemic, from phase one remobilization to today, they were able to go out from bare earth and establish the concrete pads and pour those pads and take the equipment that was in the city here going through testing and actually land it over last weekend after we had the challenges with the air quality. So we got a lot of work done during our phase one and now phase two remobilization, really focused on work around site, a lot of it outdoor work, but the contractors were very flexible, added second shifts, reevaluated the way that we were doing work relative to the controls, and I believe have continued to be very successful in managing exposures. To date at the site, we've had 160 positive cases of COVID. About 25% of those cases are people that were clearly out on the site and never on the site up to the point when they were found positive, mostly teleworkers. The others, wherever they were contracted the disease, they were on site for some period of time, but we've only had one confirmed case where we had on-site transmission from one or two workers to other workers in the same vicinity. The focus has really been on ensuring the controls are applied very effectively, face coverings, distancing, hand washing, things like that, just to make sure. And every message I've sent out through the entire period of time, I reinforce those habits as an important aspect of our ability to continue to progress our important mission and also continue to support the community. So that's the COVID picture. Next slide is really the way ahead. And so as we look at, we're entering a period of dynamic change, and in some places change was placed upon us. But if we think about, we're still going to continue to remobilize the workforce, again, in consideration of all the factors that I talked about before, doing that safely and continuing to really depend on a lot of telework. We're also in holistic negotiations with Washington State and EPA on the tank waste mission way ahead. Those are important negotiations to ensure that we stay aligned and we gain agreements on how we continue the mission of the site, really beyond what we have right in front of us with direct feed low activity waste. And I'll talk about that in a second. As I mentioned, we'll go through multiple contractor transitions. 3 of the 4 will be multi-year, multi-billion. The 4th is multi-year, almost $1 billion. And so major contract transitions. And we're making the transition to direct feed low activity waste. And I'll show you a picture of that in a second that maybe give you a better perspective on that. Our focus areas as the owner of the site and the customer and of our contractors is really the safety and health of the workforce first and foremost. We have to ensure that the workers coming here know that they're going to be able to work safely and in a healthy environment. And so I think we and our contractors are focused very heavily on that, and will continue to do so. The project delivery transition to operations, the only way I can shape that for most people to maybe be a little bit more accessible is in a construction or demolition world, the pace of operations is really defined by that single project. And at times we can spend, weeks and maybe even months resolving issues to continue to progress that work. When we transition to operations at the waste treatment plant, it's a site-wide machine. The waste treatment plant is the center of it, but the tank farms under one contractor delivers the waste to the waste treatment plant under a separate contractor. The process materials that come out, the vitrified logs, go to a facility on the site for storage under a third contractor, and then some of the spoil or some of the water waste is managed by a fourth contractor, and all of it under a framework of infrastructure, power, water, sewer, under another contractor. And all of them have to work at the same pace together, and both the UE offices oversee the whole thing. And so and you're really solving issues on minutes, hours, days, vice weeks and months. And so that culture has to make a fundamental transition, and it's not trivial. We're working very hard to make that overall transition. We as DOE are also working to be a very fair, but also a demanding customer. We want to be engaged to create opportunities for the world-class contractors we hire to be successful. But if they're not living up to the standards of the department, we're going to hold them accountable. And we've done that across the board with all of our contractors. And I think frankly, our relationship is strong, and it's based on mutual respect. And I think we're continuing that journey to really ensure that we're delivering taxpayer value every day. We've also worked to strengthen our stakeholder relationships, and I'll show you our stakeholder relationship picture in a few slides. But as you could imagine, it's a pretty complicated stakeholder world for a $2.6 billion enterprise. And lastly, it's just an aspect of teamwork. We want a partnership. All partnerships, recognize the fact that the partners aren't always equal. The Department of Energy is the accountable agency and the accountable enterprise here for the delivery of the Hanford mission. But we need to partner with the regulators, with the contractors, with the communities to make sure that we can all work together in what I think is a fairly significant effort that still has decades to go. Next slide. This is a bird's eye view, and it's hopefully you can blow that up on your screens, or we'll try to get this out to you. But this is, it's the purple section in the big picture that I presented in the first slide, and you're looking west. You can see Rainier and Adams in the top picture. In the foreground, that 65 acres is the waste treatment plant itself. That's the facility that will actually vitrify the waste that comes from the tank farms. If you go towards the west, you can see the east tank farms, and you can see the single shell tanks and double shell tanks. The blue are the double shell tanks that house, and those tanks are up to 1 million gallons. So they're not little tanks; they're big tanks underground, and they house the waste. And you can see in the farther to the west, that's the 200 West area, and there's tanks, both single shell and double shell tanks out there as well. And that distance from the east farms to the west farms, depending on where you start the journey, is probably 5 to 7 miles. And so that just gives you a picture of the site looking west, and everything the tank farms, the waste treatment plant. If you look to the right, you can see 3 basins over there. Those are the liquid effluent retention facility. That's one of the areas where the water from the processed water from the vitrification process will go. And all of this has to be enveloped under power, water, sewer, all those things. You can see Purex, the Purex Canyon. If you look just to the left of the AW farm there, that long building, we call those canyons. I look at them as like aircraft carriers that are on the ground. That's one of the places where the processing for separation of the plutonium from the uranium-irradiated fuel was conducted. And the Purex tunnels that I know most of you are aware of, that we recently completed grouting last year to stabilize, are just to the left and underground there. So this is the picture of that central plateau area, just to give you some sense of the expanse of the site, but also the expanse and the elements all associated with direct feed low activity waste when we're able to start that in just a couple of years. The next slide really represents kind of a bigger picture view and where we see ourselves going over the next 5 years. The 324 building to the right there, that's the last facility in the 300 area that's really closest to Richland and is close to the river as well, that we have a demolition project going there. We've got some very contaminated soil underneath that facility that needs to be removed first, and then we can demolish the building. You continue up along the river. DFLAW operations is big in the capital letters because that's a very significant focus, but we are continuing tank retrievals, which means we're taking liquid out of single shell tanks and moving those into double shell tanks for storage until such time as we're ready to treat. Cesium and strontium capsules. We've got a pool with about 1,900 cesium and strontium capsules that we're going to move from the pool into dry storage out on the site in the next several years. One of the progress aspects during our remobilization was we actually have completed the construction of the concrete pad, and we should have poured the concrete this week that will house those capsules in their dry storage when that project continues over the next couple of years. Reactor Basin, I talked about groundwater treatment. We have 6 pump and treat facilities around the river and 5 along the river, 1 in the Central Plateau, where we're continuing to remove contamination from the groundwater, shrink those contamination plumes, and continue to protect the river. You can see at the bottom there, we have plutonium finishing plant. We'll be able to complete that entire project early next calendar year. Redox is one of the canyons, and we're continuing to characterize and conduct risk reduction activities around the site to stabilize and make sure that we continue to do our very best and reduce risk to the river and certainly the environmental and economic center of the state. And then lower right, just some other things. We continue to look at our infrastructure. We have a water project that we'll be building over the next couple of years. Our water treatment facility on the site that just provides potable water was built in the late 40s. Obviously a very robust facility. It's worked very well. It just doesn't have the capacity that we need going forward with waste treatment plant operations. So we'll have a new process, a new program in place to build a new facility. And we're working on electrical system upgrades with BPA, et cetera. We'll continue to do risk reduction activities. We'll continue to manage the tanks to ensure that their continued viability in containing the waste until we're ready to treat. And then we're always looking for opportunities to accelerate the mission because again, reduce the liability of the overall site for the federal government, and certainly continue to reduce the risk to the river and the community in the Pacific Northwest as rapidly as we can. The next slide I call my simplified stakeholder picture. All of those enterprises around the wheel of the Hanford site, we're engaged with on a routine basis to ensure either coordination, collaboration, communications, et cetera, in our important mission to progress the effort on the site. And I talk about this as a simplified version because we really do have, there's multiple groups within each of those wheels that we're engaging with routinely to ensure that we maintain the focus and the support that we need to progress the mission here. I will tell you, we get great support from Congressman Newhouse, great support from Senators Murray and Cantwell. We stay in very close contact with all 3, provide routine updates to keep them apprised of how we're doing. And we want to continue to deliver the success that I think insurers continue to support. And we live in a virtuous circle environment here. If we deliver taxpayer value and progress, then we get support. As we continue to get support, that support translates to funding. The funding provides us with the opportunity to continue to deliver progress. And showing that we deliver taxpayer value every day is a key aspect of our focus and the focus we expect of our contractors, doing that ethically, doing it safely, and continuing to ensure that we maintain the trust of our broad stakeholder group and the collaboration with most to continue to progress our important work. So the last slide, one of the things that we talked about, or we initiated here, and this was really just in January this year, we recognize that we have to build a better unity of purpose and unity of vision across our workforce of nearly 11,000 people. And so we had a logo contest just to get people to connect with the logo that resonates with them. We offered, I think, 5 different variations, and I expected to get 50 votes because people don't often participate in stuff like that. We were actually able to get over 5,000 votes, and this was the logo that our workforce and our One Hanford team selected. And so we've started to use that a lot with a lot of the communications, a lot of our engagement with our workforce, with the contractors' workforce, just to keep everybody connected to really what I consider a great public work of this century, given this is a $2.6 billion enterprise that's really delivering value for the taxpayer dollars to a large region of our nation, and retiring a debt that we owe from a national security perspective to the Hanford site and the Hanford communities. So I'll close with just a couple of elements. I think we have a lot of reason to be optimistic going forward with the progress of the site. I think we had a very strong 2019. We started 2020 in a very good position with the site and the projects across the site all progressing well. People talk about the waste treatment plant like it's far in the future. We will finish construction on the waste treatment plant early next calendar year. Most of the plant, if not all of it, is in a startup or commissioning phase. We've hired our last group of commissioning technicians who will operate the plant, and they're going through their training. And during the last few, during this remobilization, we've actually started paving the roads and doing the finish work around the waste treatment plant, because there's no longer a risk that heavy equipment required for construction is going to tear up those roads. And so we're seeing the plant really come together, and all of the contractors that are connected with direct feed low activity waste operations are coming together and are working closely to be able to deliver this capability to the site in just a couple of years. And I think we'll be ready for that transition. So in addition to the direct feed low activity waste operations, which is the start of the tank waste treatment mission, we're also continuing to make great progress across the site on a number of other projects that are key to continue to reduce the risk and ensure that we can continue to deliver the taxpayer value that I think is becoming part of what people think about when they think about the Hanford site. So when I've been out on the site, even during the pandemic, the energy level in the workforce is high. I think we see, people see the end state coming on the work that they've done across the site. And frankly, to be frank, I wouldn't have picked a pandemic for this outcome, but the working relationships and the speed with which the department and the contractors have been able to manage a very dynamic situation is really more representative of what we're going to see in the future when direct feed low activity waste is operating. And so it's been a good opportunity for us to test our overall governance model, our communications model, our collaboration processes to get to good, conservative, risk-informed decisions quickly to continue to progress the work of the site here. So I would say, lots of reasons to be optimistic. We're certainly looking forward to continuing to support the community, continuing to drive COVID out of our thought and out of our actions. We recognize it's going to be around for a long time, and I think we've learned a lot of things through telework that we would apply going forward very effectively. But I think there's every reason to be optimistic, and I hope you are also optimistic about where we are as a site and what we're delivering to the community overall. And hopefully that's impactful. And if there's issues or concerns or questions, please, there's lots of avenues to get to me or get to members of my staff. We welcome those perspectives because it can only help us get better and continue to progress our work and deliver the value that I know we all want to provide. So I'll just thank you for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope we'll have a chance to talk in a more traditional sense in the not too distant future. And I hope today's discussion on the Hanford site was helpful in giving you a perspective and certainly maybe infused a little optimism that I hope that I think we all have. So thanks for the opportunity, Chris, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Great job, Brian, and we really appreciate you spending time with us today. The Hanford site is such a fascinating part of not just our history here locally, but the history of the country. And it's a very vital and important part of our future as well. So great job. Appreciate the update. I learn every time that I hear things. And again, we appreciate you being here. It wouldn't be, if you guys can hang with us for just a few more minutes, we've got just a couple of other things to get through. It wouldn't be a chamber luncheon without door prizes. We've been fortunate to work with multiple organizations to offer free PPE to our members over the last few months to help reduce the cost for business owners to open up safely. Today, we have 2 thermometers donated by the Association of Washington Business to give away to 2 of our attendees on the call. Congratulations to Loanne Ayers with the United Way and Kay Quinn with Zippy Fiber. Those names were randomly drawn prior to the start of the program, and Elizabeth will reach out to you so that you can collect your prizes. I'd like to thank Brian Vance again for today's presentation. Most of us can't comprehend what goes out at that site on a day-to-day basis, let alone during the COVID time. Zippy Fiber for sponsoring today's luncheon, and all of you who joined us virtually this afternoon. A video of this luncheon will be posted on the Chamber's YouTube page and shared on our Facebook page as well. Next month is the 3rd annual Tri-Cities Diversity Summit, a great event focused on the importance, impact, and benefits of diversity and inclusion in the workplace and in our community. This year, we are coordinating conversations with local leaders focused on racial equity and reconciliation, economic disparity, citizen law enforcement relations, and education equity. The final discussion will be a panel of local CEOs and will conclude with our keynote speaker, who we will be announcing. Given the unusual circumstances this year, the summit will be split over 3 days, beginning Monday, October 26th, and culminating with our monthly membership luncheon on Wednesday, October 28th. More information, including info on how to register, will be available soon on the TriCityRegionalChamber.com. That's TriCityRegionalChamber.com. As we begin the countdown to Election Day, the Chamber is diligently working to bring you the only business-focused candidate forum in the Tri-Cities region. So join us on Monday, October 5th, as the 2020 Candidate Forum videos are launched on the Regional Chamber's website and Facebook page and the YouTube channel. The 2020 Candidate Forum is designed to highlight how candidate positions integrate with local business priorities. Hear from candidates running for Benton-Franklin County Commissioner, the Washington State Senate, the Washington State House of Representatives, and the United States House of Representatives. Remember to vote for businesses this fall, and above all, just remember to vote. Get out there and vote. And with that, thank you all, and have a wonderful day.